Department of Public Health.
Beth Orwick, County Counselor.
Steve Capizzi from the County Counselor's Office.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. I'm glad to see we're all practicing social distancing and we're being safe. Our first item is the election of a new advisory board chairperson, recognizing that I have requested this and that it was put on the agenda. But due to the low attendance and understanding we have a lot of significant and serious issues, unfortunately, Spring, who thought she was going to be able to make the meeting, was unable. Dr. Garza, due to his heavy schedule, he informed us yesterday morning that he couldn't attend, and Dr. McBride, who had told us previously that today was not going to work for his schedule. So I'd like to postpone this election of a chair in the next coming meetings, once we can determine when that meeting is going to be for December, just to ensure that we have a full board to make this selection. So without any objection, I'd like to move forward into the agenda. Okay, thank you. Approval of October 28, 2020 meeting minutes. I'd like to make a motion that we receive and adopt those minutes.
I'll second that, Mary.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Smith? Jeff Smith?
You're on mute, Jeff.
Mr. Smith?
Try again with Jeff Smith. I just unmuted him.
Jeff Smith?
Yes.
Gotcha. Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Taylor?
Yes.
And Reverend Duval?
Yes. Thank you. Our next agenda item is update on investigations. Mary, could you go ahead and make a statement relative to that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think last month I made a motion that we get some communication about the external investigation about which we created a scope document and presented it to Dr. Page. I think our resolution was at our August meeting, and then we quickly developed at his request the scope. We submitted it to him in person at a September meeting. Well, I was not in person, but other people were. I was on Zoom, where he told us that he had a consultant in mind he was going to hire to develop the scope of the investigation. Then they would work with us, and then from that to develop an RFP that would go to the county council. So I think we asked for that meeting because I think we were concerned that if we just sent our scope, that given the history of, I would say, not robust conversations with the county executive's office, that we were afraid that it might go off into, well, I think my phrase was a deep black pit, but I'm a little more dramatic than other people. And so I guess we certainly have been waiting for that. Then along came the county counselor, contracted an investigation, a personnel investigation that was separate with Jennifer Joyce's company, and we knew that was moving along. And then I guess there were kind of rumblings around that maybe that was the consultant that Dr. Page had suggested, or maybe that one needed to happen before the one that we asked to occur would happen. But again, we're left to wondering about it and to thinking about it, and instead of having just direct communication, and I guess I would just say it doesn't have to be this tough, folks. We did what we were asked to do. We handed it over. And I think we would just like some communication. And it has to come from the county executive's office, which is what our resolution was last month, because this isn't the county counselor's investigation. And I think Beth has been very straightforward with us, telling us that that's the case. And she's been an intermediary to a certain extent, but why we need an intermediary, I don't know. So I put it on there because I asked to have it put it on again, because otherwise, if we don't have a placeholder, I'm afraid that what will happen, and my paranoid self says what I think is happening is that we just lose interest, or over time it just kind of goes away, and that we have a new director who's very energetic and moving forward, that we enjoy working with, and the personnel investigation is going on, and I just don't want to forget that we asked for an outside independent investigation, and it was a unanimous vote by this board. So with that, I put it on there because even after our resolution last month, we still haven't heard anything from the county executive's office.
Okay,
Reverend Duval, may I be recognized?
yes, please.
Thank you. It's Beth Orwick for those listening, not by video, but by phone. Ms. Taylor, thank you for your comments and always for your concern and for keeping the placeholder. That is really appreciated. I spoke to Dr. Page several times about this, and he asked me to speak on his behalf and to let you know, and then also I'll speak on my own behalf to let you know our personnel and legal investigation is still ongoing into personnel and legal matters, as you correctly noted, working with Jennifer Joyce and Susan Ryan's Vera Causa group. This is not finished. So we are still in the middle of that and wrapping that up. And I want to let the board know that I have been working with Doug Burris to keep him updated as I can and to keep that line of communication flowing. And he has been a great help in furthering our investigation and getting us the information that we need to make that happen. I anticipate that there will be information that is gleaned through the legal personnel investigation that will be important moving forward and might also coincide with the scope document that you've mentioned in the last few meetings. And this board has asked for that outside investigation. But what Dr. Page would like for me to convey to you is that it would be important to consider the information that we have gleaned from this first personnel legal investigation. And there will be things that we have gleaned that will be important to implement immediately and to not put off. And it will be important to look and see if the, Mr. Burris has been able to implement those changes as appropriate and then review that. So as we're moving forward, I think the takeaway is that we need to look at the lessons learned from what we've already gathered, see where we're at with that, and then in 2021, go through, look at that scope, look and see what we've already been able to implement as the county and the Justice Services, and then look to see what we've learned and what we can do better. That's where that RFP and going to the county council for that permission would come in. It is ongoing, and I know it's frustrating, and I can sense your frustration. I am not allowed ethically, legally to discuss those personnel issues with the board at this time. It is still very much ongoing, but I wanted to give you that information as I know you want that information, and that's what we can share with you right now. And I will do everything I can to keep that communication going as it's appropriate ethically and legally. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mary, are there any following comments you'd like to make to Ms. Orwick?
I really would like a broader conversation from other members of the board too. I am perfectly aware that I am often the squeaky wheel, and I'm perfectly happy to play that role. But I know that my other fellow board members agree with many of the things I say because they tell me so after board meetings and they chime in. So if there could be a broader conversation from other members of the board present, I would appreciate that.
Okay. We'll start. Twyla, Ms. Lee, do you have any comments relative to the investigations and the conversations thus far?
My comments as in position is the same as it's been since day one. The information that we get often is from the news Post Dispatch. I feel as if we're just here to listen or sit and listen to what is being told, that we really have no way of knowing what we're being told, if it's factual, if it's actually happening. Policies that we've been told that's implemented, like what are the checks and balances to ensure that this board was restarted for a reason, and I'm not sure if what we're doing is actually meeting the reason why the board was formed. So that's still my position.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, good morning. Jeff, do you have any comments, sir?
Good morning. I think the board spoke unanimously and without equivocation when we made our resolution a few months back. My position has not changed since then. I think that, like Mary, I'm pleased with some of the new initiatives that we're hearing about from the jail's new leadership. But I think we all agree that there are systemic issues that have been going on for years and years, that the departure of one or two or three individuals that may result from a personnel investigation are probably insufficient to address. So I continue, I echo the kind of continued broader concern and an interest in not allowing the short-term personnel investigation to interfere with a larger external assessment of how we got here and how some of the specific personnel issues that I'm sure will be illuminated in the Vera Causa report, how those were allowed to persist for as long as they did.
Yes, sir. Thank you. To the board and to the county counselor's office, I guess my overriding concern is, are there any timelines that can be discussed? I mean, I know that Vera was given an extension. Do we have any timelines, Ms. Horwick, as to when some of these things will move forward? I mean, I understand 2021. I know this is November, but I actually have two questions. Do we have a timeline on when estimated of when the investigation will be completed? And two, has there been any discussion on how it's going to be dispensed to the public? Is there going to be an executive summary? I mean, could you give us some information as to how it's going to roll out?
Thank you. I would be uncomfortable discussing any of that in a public forum. I think that would be inappropriate. And I do understand the board's interest in this, and I appreciate it. However, I don't want to do anything that would compromise what we're working towards from a legal point of view. I can say that we are near wrapping this up. I don't have anything for you today, though, and anything else I would like to discuss in a closed session. But I will say there's not a whole lot that I can discuss with this advisory board much further.
Phil?
Yes, ma'am.
So the only thing I would add is that, my concern that this is labeled a personnel investigation, which I'm sure it is. But in the past, the board will remember that usually the reasons for our going into closed sessions or things that can't be shared with us, either things that can't be shared with us at all or going into closed session, is that it was a personnel issue. So it just feeds into my overall concerns about how this if this investigation really is a precursor to a larger one, how can it possibly be shared with us, or I would say, how can it be shared with Doug if it is a personnel investigation coming out of the county counselor's office? And so I just put that out there because that personnel is the reason that we've heard, not every time, but most times, for why we can't know things. And why we can't know things has been the source of just ongoing frustration, not just from me, but from all members of the board. And, continuing to hear things from the Post-Dispatch that must be, that we haven't heard ourselves. Even public documents that go to the Post-Dispatch first without reaching out to us. So I'm concerned about the labeled personnel. I'm concerned about how it will be used and whether it will be used. I think the county counselor's office is absolutely within their rights to have their own investigations and create their own work product. I'm not challenging that in any way. Everybody has a role to play. That is one of their roles. But we have a role to play too, and we have been frustrated in that role, I think, over and over again through the use of the term personnel.
Okay. Any last comments? Anybody else wants to weigh in before we move to the next agenda item? Okay, we'd like a discussion on the review of standard board communication. And again, Mary, I'd like to yield to you to give us the opening discussion on this item.
Yeah, we might not be able to go into too much detail today, but this last month, Spring and I offered to take up Valerie's hard work on this and start to put some details behind it, or maybe pull some details out of it to streamline it, make it easier for us to understand, and to get input from the board about standard board communication. Valerie did, for those of you who won't see it, there are 4 or 5 sheets of proposals of how the board would get information at different levels of investigations and regarding deaths of inmates, sentinel events, serious events, those kinds of, or policy changes, those kinds of things. And I think with the intention of setting some expectations for all of us about, so that and I would say corrections medicine and Valerie have been kind of the standout for us in terms of communication over these last months, that we always get good communication. I think part of it came from her intent to make sure that we were getting what we needed in the detail we needed it, not from the Post-Dispatch. And so she sent those out to the board members. I have kind of polled the board members about for comments, and I got some back, but I think that's going to be something we'll be working on through the next month. I think overall, Tim McBride sent me some notes, and then I have some notes too, and I'm not sure whether it's helpful to go through the details on this, Valerie, except that, let me bring up Tim's email. They echo in some ways some of what Twyla has offered. And that is, how is it that we hear things quickly and in enough detail that we don't rely on the Post-Dispatch or public radio to give us our information. So I think the major comments I had, Valerie, were just some detailed things related to maybe lining this up with, hold on, just trying to. Lining this up with our conversations about what a standard review looks like. In the case of deaths, lining it up with and asking, is the in-custody death review process and team even still operational. I didn't see it referred to in the sheets, but those are the questions too for Doug that you guys maybe need to talk about. We have suggested kind of modeling it on the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare white paper on patient safety, right? Which mirrors which takes best practice, best and evidence-based work from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ. We've been doing this in the hospital side for almost 20 years, and the Commission on National Commission on Correctional Healthcare has adopted that. I know they don't accredit you guys; they accredit the juvenile facility. But I just would encourage you. I mean, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. It's root cause analysis, and it's failure modes effects analysis, and it's a way of looking at things from a preventive point of view instead of waiting for people to be hurt and die. It's the basis behind it. So some of my suggestions, and I'll send them back to you, Valerie, go to that. I think some of your suggestions, the first thing is immediate notification of deaths and serious events. I think we've had that in the last, maybe 6 months, right? Or maybe 5 months. We've been getting that. Doug has let us know about some things, and so that we haven't been taken off surprise. But what happens after that, as Tim says in his email, he said, the protocol asks that, this is Tim's words, the protocol asks that we are told about a patient death right away by phone call or email. This appears to have happened in all the deaths that that have happened since I've been on the board, so I'm satisfied with that. But the protocol asks that there be a follow-up board session to discuss the patient deaths and serious events. In the case of almost all those patient deaths, I do not think this has happened. This is my major concern, and this must be rectified. The follow-up needs to happen. So, and also he says, when we read about reports of patients' deaths in the newspaper, it would be nice to know what the heck those reports are and that we get them too. So I think you have anticipated follow-up meetings in your standard board communication, but it skips over the initial notification, and then it goes to identifying the gaps. And so I'll go over this in the weeds stuff with you, Valerie, because you and I speak the same language on this. It doesn't talk about what I think most of the board wants to hear right after the initial is a timeline of what happened, when did it happen, and then a move to the gaps. Were there any gaps in practice, or was it not preventable? And it's that early identification of whether it was preventable that I think, and saying those words, which I know drive fear in the heart of Steve and Beth, but we only need to work on things that are preventable, right? I mean, that's the whole point of root cause analysis, that you don't spend your time on stuff you can't prevent. Some people get sick. The ones who don't get sick and die, those, the ones that we could have spared, that's what we need to work on. So, I think we can flesh out some of that just a little bit. I think you assumed that was a part of it, and it just didn't get in there. The last thing I'll say is that overarching, and I would please, the people who haven't sent me their comments on and marking up these sheets that I resent to you, please do send them to me. The only other overarching thing is that it's very detailed as corrections medicine, but I feel like that takes us right back to July 2019 when we first got together. You weren't here with us, Valerie, where it was very clear that corrections medicine and corrections had two separate investigations, didn't always communicate with each other, and certainly didn't do it together. And it was very, very hard for us to get information that way. And I think Emily will remember, I think you all made great strides operationally in working more closely together on those investigations. But your sheets that came to me are just as to corrections medicine. So my greater request will be, when we send all of our markups back to you, is that you and Doug work in concert with each other and that we have one standard board communication for the Justice Center, and that it includes, and I think that was the intention of the in-depth custody review. That team was corrections and correction medicine, and it lays out timelines and reporting guidelines and notification to the family. And it doesn't talk about getting back to us, but I think that was the intention of that policy that was put into place when Troy Doyle and Jack Webb were interims. And I think they saw the gap between the two. So that's kind of my final comment. So, I mean, this is one of those things that requires like 2 or 3 people at the most to hammer out stuff later on, which we will do, I promise you. And I'm sorry that it has taken us 3 months to get to it. But I open it up to any other comments from other board members, but also encourage you to send me your, scan or take pictures of your forms and send them to me so that Spring and Valerie and I can work on something for next month. And that's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Twyla, do you have any additional comments on this subject?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Sorry, 2 comments very briefly. First, and I may have seen this in someone's comments or possibly not. My main question is, how do we know when we're closing an investigation? What's the moment at which we feel like we can move on and have adequately, addressed the death? That would be a question for me about, is there a resolution made at the board to determine that, or, how is that determined? So I'd like to maybe explore that. Perhaps more broadly, I have been, and this is a little bit outside the scope of communication to the board, but one of the concerns that we've heard a lot from families is that there's been inadequate communication to families. And so I would be interested in seeing what I'm sure there is some chart about the timeline of communication to families when there are patient deaths and or sentinel events. And I'd like to see that if possible.
Jill,
Okay.
Can I make a comment on that? About 6 months ago, after I reviewed all the Justice Services policies and procedures and then poured myself a large glass of wine, I came to the board and I made some suggestions about that, Jeff, and thank you so much for bringing it up again, because it did fall into a black hole. Communications to family are spread out in a number of different policies. One is when there's a serious event, one is when there's a death, and then there's a separate one about notifications and who does it and when it happens. But it doesn't follow best practices that we know from in terms of healthcare, which is ongoing, a series of conversations ongoing and talking about who's responsible for those. I think, frankly, we've gotten much better in our communication with families, but you're right that it's not laid out there, and it really needs to be, because and some of this is complicated by liability issues that have come about. But I think if we approach these things from the very beginning with good communication, those things are less of a concern, and families have a right to hear what's going on. So I appreciate that. And the only other thing about your comment about when is a case closed, Valerie and I didn't mention it because Valerie and I won't talk about it, but the other thing that's missing from some of those is the mention of the ongoing monitoring of when process changes have occurred, when gaps are identified and process changes have occurred. She knows, and Alex Garza and I've talked about this with her, there's an ongoing performance monitoring system that doesn't rely on, you don't say, oh, the changes we've made are successful because nobody else died. Or we're waiting for the other shoe to drop and hurt somebody. You actually have there is a model for this and a performance improvement specialty where you monitor it over a period of time to see whether the changes you put into place are really fixing what you thought was wrong. And then you can tweak it. And then there is some time at the end where you say, okay, it's soup. And that's what you're really asking for too, Jeff, I think.
It is. And if I just, one more thing briefly, Mr. Chair, I would love to see in the development of a family communication policy, and I don't know who the relevant department to collaborate with would be, but just given the trauma that often follows for, surviving members of a family, I would love to see if, as part of that communication, there were some effort to collaborate with, I don't know exactly who it would be or where they would be in county government, but some type of therapist to be appointed to support the family, so that, which I think would be helpful on a lot of levels, but most importantly, helpful for the survivors in a family, grappling with this. And I'm not sure if that's already done. Maybe Mary, since you were kind of on this 6 months ago, you might know, but it seems to me like a basic humane thing we could be doing that will also, I think, help from lots of different other angles, if we do that correctly.
This is around the time when we were discussing the idea of an ombudsperson, not necessarily a therapist, but a ombudsperson. And I know there are budget issues and all that, but Phil and I did a fair amount of research on jail ombudsmen around the country and who's doing it on a statewide basis and who's doing it in county jails. And I'm not saying that that should be the person, but there are models out there for who has continuing contact with families. And even 6 months out or 9 months out, check-ins about how they're doing. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor and Jeff. I just want to mention real briefly that because through your comments, I began to reflect on some of the challenges we faced early on. And I think that Director Burris, I look forward to a very robust conversation relative to this. I don't know if you've been able to review the form. Are you aware of the form that we're discussing, Mr. Burris?
No, Reverend Duvall, I am not.
Okay. So Mary and Jeff, I'll, I know, Mary, we're still waiting, including myself, to weigh in on the comments, but I think it would be helpful if we got that document to Director Burris, so he's very familiar in the direction and path we're going, because I think it's imperative that just like we're putting in these requests for a standard communication, that it's inclusive to the correctional side. And I'll get into that in a little more detail before we get off of the call.
Valerie, you don't need to send those to Doug. I'll send him my copy that has my markups already, so you can see my comments. If that would be a head start for you, I'll be glad to do that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, Mary, if we could get that to Doug as soon as possible. Okay. All right. To the next agenda item, which I think, Mary, I think we'll be able to merge that in, since we just had a good discussion on this. The review of that update on the most recent inmate death. You want to say a little something about that, and then I'll weigh in some comments.
Why don't you take it up? I think maybe Emily may have some things to say as well.
Okay, I just want to, with some clarity, there was a article in the Post-Dispatch last Thursday, I believe, Thursday or Friday. The article caught my attention, not just the article alone, as short as it may have been, but I normally don't do this, but I looked at the public comments and I was kind of troubled by one of the public comments that medical concerns of why this inmate may or may not have been taken to the hospital just based on those early signs and information that the inmate shared, as well as what a correctional officer observed. So I sent the article back to the board, and I just asked them, please review this article, but more importantly, if you can look at the public comments. So with that said, board members did weigh in, and it raised some additional questions, and we had some concerns. So I don't know what you could discuss, Emily, but that's what generated this interest.
Sure. So I will kind of move forward with the pieces that we can discuss in this forum and move from there. So my intent today will be to update the board and engage around this most recent death, if you recall, that occurred on May 15th of 2020. So the updated information that we now have available to share with the board is that the autopsy report is complete and is available for review by the board. And I'll follow up on some of the related internal process assessment pieces by the corrections medicine team. So that report, again, is a public document and is available for the advisory board to review. Autopsy reports do not fall under the protection of HIPAA, and it is something that can be discussed in this forum. I do want to note that medical care that is provided and that is documented in the medical record obviously is protected by HIPAA, and so that piece we won't be able to discuss in this setting. So I'll just give a brief view of the autopsy report, what an autopsy report provides, just for a little bit of context and what was found here. And then I have provided a copy of that to administrative team to ensure that gets out to the board for detailed review. So essentially, when an autopsy is performed, what that report will include is a postmortem examination of the body, so kind of a physical examination that happens. There is a history that is taken by the investigator. So the investigator is a member of the medical examiner's team. When they go to the scene or when they engage immediately after the death, it is a narrative that they put together based on talking to people who were there or engaging with the police through the police report. The data is not directly from the medical record that is taken, the history that is taken from that investigator. Also in that report includes microscopic examinations of several organ tissues as determined is necessary or helpful by the medical examiner. And then there is what we call a forensic toxicology report, which basically looks at what substances may have been on board preceding the death of the individual. And all of that information together, and then a forensic pathologist who's kind of a specific type of physician who does this work determines cause of death. So in the case of Mr. Williams, who we are speaking about today, the cause of death was determined to be cardiomyopathy exacerbated by opioid withdrawal. So cardiomyopathy is disease essentially of the heart muscles that can lead to failure and other heart problems, and in certain situations can be fatal. I will let you review the report in detail, but I can share that some of the basic findings in that the examination did show this chronic disease of the heart. The heart essentially was large and dilated, which means kind of the space where blood flows in was larger than it should be, which is kind of based on chronic strain to the heart. These are chronic problems that we see develop. The toxicology report was positive for opioids, and so these substances, as well as their metabolites, opioids, cocaine, marijuana, as well as other like kind of cough and cold types of medicine. So those are kind of the main findings that were identified on that report. And again, we can review that in a lot more detail, and I'm happy to answer questions. I do also want to share some of our themes from the internal assessments that have taken place. Obviously, the loss of life is tragic and difficult, certainly true in this case for patients, for other patients, for our staff, and and obviously for family and loved ones. So I think that obviously was true in this case and continues to be something that we are all trying to work together to support as much as we can. I will share that we found in our assessment no breaches in policies or protocol for care delivery or individual gaps in care decisions that were made. There was really one of the things that did go well here was pretty effective communication and collaboration among our corrections medicine staff, the justice services staff, as well as the EMS teams that were on site when the patient was found unresponsive. Really rapid and effective communication after the death with the board and immediate reach out to the family. So I think, as Mary has alluded to, some good work in that communication pathway, but always something that we're working to improve. I will say that in the opportunity space, we really did take this as an opportunity to review policy and procedure around responses to critical events and ongoing assessment of the challenges and the complexity of dealing with substance use and the effect on health. So I would say that we have kind of reviewed all of those pieces, used it as educational pieces for our staff. But I will say that the responses to the particular medical information presented was appropriate. We also obviously continue to engage around these topics of communication, closed loop communication, and kind of this interdisciplinary approach in communication between officers, patients, and our medical staff, so that when a patient raises a concern or a change in status, or even if they don't, but an officer who knows the patient well notices something different, that we continue to kind of manage these loops of communication. There really has been significant progress in that space. Obviously, that's culture work that is ongoing, and really we've appreciated the board's support in continuing to build that. So I think those are that's the basics that I have to share at this moment, and certainly will entertain questions or thoughts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Doucette. Are there any questions or comments relative to the subject? The floor is open. Jeff? Mary?
The only thing I would say, it is a good example of good initial communication and then not hearing anything since really May or June. And that's on us as well. But I mean, I think that's something that will be changed when we do this. I just want to say, for just without going into detail on this one, but like in my past life, I looked at, deaths and adverse events related to medical care. I mean, that's what I've done for 40 years. So I'm sorry, but one of the themes that comes through that people have to be aware of, and I'm not saying that this is the case in this one, is that when people have an underlying illness, it's it's easy. I'm not saying you took this step, but it's easy to say, oh, he had cardiomyopathy. He was really sick. He was, the question for lay people is, was this his day to die, right? And maybe it was, given everything that happened. And if that's the case, then it wasn't preventable. And I'm totally with that. But I just there is a warning, and we had this in the hospitals too. If a patient was really sick with cancer, or if a patient was 93, some people relaxed. And I would say that's not a cause for relaxing. I'm looking at why, whether we took a day from somebody or took an hour for somebody, was it preventable? That's really what we should be concerned with. So, and I think you have used that rigor in your examination, and I appreciate it, Emily, but I just wanted to put it out there because I think of the other talk I've heard around town about this death, oh, he was sick. He had that underlying cardiomyopathy. And that's not, that is a contributing factor, but it's not the question we should be asking. That's all I have on this one.
Thank you. Jeff Smith, any other comments?
Nothing except to thank Dr. Doucette.
All right, very well. Dr. Doucette, thank you, you and your team, and we still have some comments we'll receive from Valerie here in a few minutes. Okay, I'd like to pretty much turn over the remaining agenda items covering the correctional side. To first tackling these items, one on your staff that you would want to answer out, please do at this time, sir.
Thank you, Reverend Duvall. First up, we have the dashboard, and Aaron's going to put some information on the screen right now and share what he.
Sure. Ray, should I share from my computer?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
sounds good. I haven't shared from this WebEx before, so let me see if I can figure out how to get this up.
Yeah, so you're looking for shared file. It looks like you did a shared whiteboard.
Right. So if I close the whiteboard, I don't know how to. Yeah, I'll close that. But if I share a file, it doesn't let me share a web page, does it? Because that's what I'm.
Yeah, if it's open, it shouldn't allow you to share the web page.
When I click share file, it wants me to. It just goes to my computer to open a file, unlike on the Zoom calls.
You don't have a share screen or share web page?
Just share file and share whiteboard, unfortunately.
Aaron, why don't you and Ray work offline on this and we
Sure.
can move on
Yep.
while the two of you are doing that? Just let us know.
And we'll jump
when-
back.
Yeah, we'll put you in immediately as soon as
Yep.
you have the time.
Sounds good.
Okay. Jill, census report. We currently have 945 residents in our facility. 881 are male, 64 are female. The federal count is 132. Last week, we met with officials from the U.S. Marshal Service and told them that our contract with them is targeted for 115, and we were going to have to get to that level. We could not do any more admissions. They agreed and were very supportive and understanding. And our census actually went down to, I think it was 127 with the federal count earlier over the last week. But then there was a group of county residents who were indicted by the feds and became federal clients. So it went back up to 132. But that is where our jail census is currently at. We continue to work with the court. In fact, I look forward to a meeting with the presiding judge next week about ideas on reducing the sentence. The Department of Public Health and Valerie put together a list of people who are at high risk for COVID, and we're going to share that with the court. We also developed a list of people who have been here for extended periods of time and gave that to Wesley Bell in his office, and they're looking at those who might be appropriate on the lesser charges, perhaps for diversion or time served, but they're reviewing those on a case-by-case basis. Jeff, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much. My question is, given that I think most data suggests, crime usually spikes in the, July, August, that correlates with weather. To what do you attribute the higher census counts in the last couple months? Is it like an extended period of kind of warm weather, or that's broadly leading to more crimes, or is there something exogenous to that you think accounts for the higher census?
Thank you for that question. I truly believe that what it is with COVID going on, courts have slowed down substantially. In fact, I think the federal court is shutting down for a couple of weeks. And we currently have on just the county residents, we have 360 who have been here for 6 months or longer, awaiting some type of deposition with their situation. And so what it is, I think the rest have slowed down a little bit. People are being held for longer periods of time because they're not being processed through court as quickly as we would like, or as we would hope for.
That makes sense. Thank
Mary?
you.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
Doug, yeah, I think we've been concerned for a long time about the length of stay, especially pretrial length of stay.
Right.
Before we had dashboards and knew how many were really, we didn't get those numbers, but we had an individual case with one of the patients who died, who had been here for a very, very long time. And I can't remember whether he was serving a sentence or pretrial, but we have heard lots through the MacArthur grant and through your own internal committee that reviews probation violations and things like that about really good success in releasing people. But I guess I'm still concerned that we have a pretty significant, I love your stuff, Aaron, by the way, a pretty significant length of stay in the pretrial group. And so is that the substance of your conversation with Wesley Bell? And if so, I would, add my encouragement to that, because I think we've made some great progress on the probation violations for nonviolent crimes. But this length of stay, especially with Black males, I mean, Aaron's statistics can't just jump out at you. I mean, our statistics about length of stay and about our percentage of prisoners, Black males, white males, white female, Black females, white females, it follows exactly what we know about the criminal justice system and the inequities in the system in general. And if you look at that along with the length of stay stats, it's pretty damning,
Yes, to answer your question, absolutely. That's what we've been focusing on with Wesley Bell, where we gave him the name of every individual here over 6 months. And I hope to give him another list. And that was a week ago yesterday. And I know I received communication from his office yesterday. They are reviewing it on a case-by-case basis. But our plans are within the next few weeks then that was the list over 6 months. And then our plan is to go from a 4 to 6 months and just keep concentrating to see what we can do to reduce this length of stay. Jail is not the place for people to have extended periods of time. And we should do everything in our power to get these people out and on to whatever the next phase of their life is.
Especially if they have if they have an addiction and they can't get addiction treatment in the jail because of COVID. I mean, there's everything in the world is working against them.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Hey, it's Ray. We're ready with those slides when you are.
Okay, let's go to that now. Thank you.
There we go. Cool. Ray. Okay, so let's actually start with the well, we could start with the medical dashboards. Yeah, that's fine. So so this month, Valerie and her team. Is this my mic that's giving lots of noise? There's a lot of feedback. Okay, this week or this month, Valerie and her team talked to me about taking the dashboards, the PDFs that they'd been having and presenting each month, and turning them into an interactive format online, such as this, eventually to be put on the website next to the 2 dashboards that we already have. And so these are the drafts of the dashboards that I've come up with to represent the medical data. There's a kind of like with the ones that we already have, there's a main and a supplemental. I stuck as much as I could on the main one, And then, excuse me, and then whatever didn't fit on there, I put onto the supplemental one. So Valerie, have you gotten a chance to take a look at these?
Yes, and I'd like
Okay,
to
good.
thank Aaron too for the hard work of taking our, pushing the maturity of our metrics. So
No worries. I just wanted, I wanted you to be able to chime in on these two because, if you had any suggestions, perhaps, about how they could be improved. Now, since Ray is sharing from his screen, I can't hover over each dot. So we may not be able to see from this screen the exact numbers for each of the metrics because when I try to hover over, it's not on my computer specifically. But this is generally what they're going to look like.
Right. No, I appreciate that, Aaron. And my message for the board this month would be that, yes, absolutely. As you can see, we're trying to integrate this so that we get really two benefits of that collaboration. One, that it takes the metrics to a higher maturity from what my team was currently producing because we do not have Aaron's skills on my team. So we're happy to have that partnership. And two, it creates or goes much, much further for us to have that improved alignment between what is happening in the operations of each of our two divisions within the facility. So we've got a consistent view. And I think that will help also make the interpretation of the information easier. So all of that said, this is absolutely a draft of that integration. And Aaron and my team are still collaborating to replicate what we already know to be those important visuals and pieces of information that were defined previously by our data subcommittee that led to the visuals, the previous version of our visuals. So we have a little bit of a roadmap to still get to that, but that was the intention with this. And to give an overall view of what the information, the trends look like for this month for the corrections medical processes and insights, we really did not see any. I know this looks like a very different visual from what we have reviewed in the past, but there are no concerning trends that I could speak to. I'll digest these more offline and can certainly answer questions as they arise, but there weren't any trends really to point out that I would draw your attention to and then lead into a further discussion of what caused that at this point.
Sure, Valerie, just a couple things I wanted to point out about this. So I was able to fit all, I think it's 27 total, 27 metrics onto the main and the supplemental one combined. So Ray, if you click on the can you click on the supplemental one? Yeah, so this is where kind of the spillover, some of the more kind of the mishmash of other things have fallen onto the supplemental one. You can click back on the medical one. So between the main one and the supplemental one, I was able to fit every metric from your PDF on there, but I do want to mention that excuse me, Ray, can you click back on the main one for a second? So for the 4 on the right, the percent of provider visits and the percent of persons, these are, I don't want to give the misimpression that these are grouped into graphs by which say, for example, the diabetes and hypertension, they're not necessarily intended to be on the same graph because they're meant to be linked to one another. I generally, excuse me, I generally just put the ones on each graph that I could fit there that fit on the same mathematical scale. And I did that because it's just the easiest way to fit as many lines as possible onto as few windows as possible. So I don't like, for example, that bottom one where it shows one of pregnancy and cardio disease going way up and the other going way down is not meant to, the automatic light went off near my desk. Hang on. There we go. Is not meant to show, starkly that there's a huge, discrepancy going on. Those two variables just are on the same graph because they tend to be on the same mathematical scale. The other thing I wanted to mention is, Valerie, the only kind of thing that popped out to me when I was looking at the data that Catherine gave me earlier this week is that the percent of provider visits for mental health disorders for October, which was just compiled a couple days ago, looks like it was below the rest of where it was for the rest of the year. It looked like it was in the mid 30s.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
I think I'll defer a comment to that then after I look into that.
Sure. Yeah.
What you're referencing there. But
Yep. That and the substance use disorders percent of provider visits for substance use disorders was just under 10%. It hadn't been under 10% before this year. So that was just some recent findings from the October data. Everything else I think was pretty on par.
So I think the message for the board will be that I think that our next step internally will be to step back to the feedback that we've already received from the data subcommittee that led to the initial view of the medical metrics, and we will replicate that to the extent that that this technology that Aaron is using can replicate or can meet those expectations.
Sure. Yep.
That we will need to gather the data subcommittee again, and then discuss what visuals are most meaningful given any kind of constraints or just capabilities of the GIS system that might then change the way that we want to see this information. So some more work to come from some more requests to come from the data subcommittee, I think. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So these are the supplemental and the main medical dashboards. Is the board also looking for a monthly update on the DJS dashboards as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But well, I mean, whether or not we talk about it today is one thing. If you're moving on from the medical, I have a comment.
Sure.
If that's what you were doing. So Valerie, I've mentioned this before, but I think it's helpful with Aaron coming on and grouping some of these things. In the world of patient safety, percentage of safety events is not a meaningful number. It is not something we track. And just as percentage of people with a sentinel event is not meaningful. It is something that people use to give them comfort. Now, for example, if you had percentage of medication events relative to the number of medication doses you were giving, which I think is huge, that's a meaningful number because it tells you something about the noise and then what your fallout really is. But patient safety events in my world, patient safety events and sentinel events are best expressed in raw numbers. And so I would expect, because we don't want any of them, and I understand that some of them are going to happen because you're busy, but it might be helpful to have a graph that has the raw number of patient safety events, sentinel events, and patient deaths over a period of time. As kind of an increase in severity. But if you don't want to put those on a chart, that would be fine for me too, because we get the real numbers from you every month. But if you're going to express it, my preference would be, and I'm happy to have a conversation outside, my preference would be not to express it as a percentage of the number of people, because that is only used to say, see, we have so many patients and we don't have this many events. It's only meaningful if you are really have a reliable patient safety event reporting system and you think you're getting absolutely every single event reported. And I'm sure that you don't feel that, because most hospitals don't feel that either, unless they've developed a trigger system that pulls from their electronic medical record, or unless they have some kind of a really rich near miss reporting system. These things are not, they're just not important. And I don't want people to have comfort in any level of sentinel event or patient safety event. That's all I have, Phil.
All right,
Anyone?
thank you, Mary. Just for general purposes, board member Twyla Lee did have to get off the call and go to another meeting. So technically, just going forward in this meeting, recognizing that we will not have a quorum for the remainder of this meeting. Jeff Smith, any comments, sir, about Mr. Levin's presentation?
No, but thank you for clarifying about the lack of correlation, because that was the first thing that stuck to my mind, that I was going to ask.
Yeah. No, I realized I should probably put in a caveat about that, because the way that those variables are grouped makes it look like they're going, kind of against one another, in a causal way, but they're not. They're just grouped by mathematical scale. So, just for a minute or two, Ray, can you show the main Justice Services dashboard? Yeah, we have the updates for October. I'm not sure if there was anything on here that really stuck out other than the fact that the population went up. And so as you can see, the bookings went up, the daily population was going up through October. I think that's obviously something we'd already discussed.
Okay.
And then the supplemental dashboard real quickly. Use of force incidents in the jail were not high this past month in October. Otherwise, social and professional visits were still very low due to COVID. And I think that's all.
Doug?
Yes, Jeff.
Do you attribute the longer stays from Black men as a function of poverty and increased likelihood to be relying on a public defender that's, overburdened?
I would say there's multi reasons for it. I do know the public defender's office is just completely overran, but they're doing an excellent job working with us. I really appreciate their leadership and how they do all they can with what they have. As far as the African American males, yes, I think that there is poverty, but also I think we're also familiar with the Attorney General report from Missouri that showed that African Americans are 91% more likely to be stopped by law enforcement. And so I think there's real big issues across the board as to why we have longer stays with them. That answer your question, Jeff? I'm sorry, I think you're on mute. I apologize.
It does succinctly answer the question. It gives me thoughts about, future directions and things that we could be doing to try to mitigate that disparity. But, we can talk about that in offline and in future meetings.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we move on? Mary?
Well, there's just one thing that doesn't have to do with the stats, but I think it shouldn't go unmentioned. And that was the other thing we got notification of this month was from you, Doug, which was a disturbance on several of the floors related to, inmates having difficulty, understandable difficulty with having to remain in their cells for long periods of time, and then only being able to come out with a limited number of people. And it was it was a difficult situation that you reported to us on. And I just want to say in public that I think from what we heard in terms of your engaging and you and senior staff going there and listening and staying for a long period of time and listening was very impressive to me. And I think that some of our use of force and some of our discussion about de-escalation and all of those kinds of things, I hoped were playing out in that scenario. And I just want to say I was impressed and I was pleased to see it. And this group only knows me as the talker, but in my real life now, I make a living listening to people, which is hilarious, right? And so listening as a skill and sitting your bottom in a chair and staying there long enough to really hear what people are concerned about is so powerful. And we don't hear this very often, and we often don't have an opportunity to say thank you and good work. At least I don't. So I just wanted to make sure that we don't get to the end of the meeting with that being unsaid.
Thank you so very much. And I very proudly did 10 letters of commendation to staff here for the excellent work that they did. I know there are institutions and areas all over the country that it would not have been handled as it was here, and that there would have been people hurt. But the truth is they did have legitimate complaints, and we were able to adapt to their needs better. So it did work out, I think, as best as it possibly could. Thank you again. And I guess that does tie into the use of force policy, which is up next. I do have an update on that. The reason I requested this be on the agenda is because we had previously talked about eliminating our use of force policy and replacing it with a policy of dealing with subject behavior, where it deals more with the interpersonal communication than it does direct orders and commands. I would like the board's advice on moving forward with this, and the update that I have is the place where this was originated and has trained places and people throughout the country has volunteered to come and provide the training for us. We would only have to pay mileage and hotel and food for that. But this is something we could have done in the coming weeks, actually. So I'd like the board's advice on moving forward with that.
I'd like Doug to, I was supposed to follow up. I'm still reviewing after we've already adopted the minutes. So I appreciate this conversation coming back up. I had been meaning to get in touch with Major McKnight. I'm interested to hear some of his comments relative to what he gleaned from his visit. And I have some questions about the training as a whole. So if you could afford me an opportunity to come and talk to Major McKnight and yourself, just so I can get a better grasp on it. But no, I don't want us to delay it. However, I want to have some more discussion about the use of force, just so I'm getting a clear understanding of what the approach is going to be, and more importantly, the rollout of the training and some of those things. I'd like to do that. But in essence of going forward, if you feel that it's something that can be scheduled and it's within your budget, then please go right ahead.
Thank you. Anyone else have some advice on this?
I'm really encourage you to move forward. My only concern was, as part of the old policy, it required incident reports when physical use of force was employed. And so I assume that will still be the case, so that if restraint or chair or taser is used, there will still be a requirement for an incident report, so that we do have still some idea of how often that's being used.
Absolutely. I think it's imperative that we do that. I can't imagine us having a policy without that.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, do you have any advice in this area?
I was heartened a month or 6 weeks ago, or when you told me about this, and I'm thrilled that they're doing it for just expenses. I was afraid it would cost a lot of money.
Okay, thank you. The one thing that I failed to mention is I, of course, will be working with Ms. Nelson going forward, because a lot of this training is identifying behavior issues instead of gaining control. So I imagine our psych visits will go up, perhaps even substantially. So we'll include her in any implementation. But I still think that's a more appropriate response with many of these incidents, as opposed to just trying to gain control.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on something. Mary, you're kind of getting in my lane ahead of time, but that's fine. Mary normally does that. We work well together, Mary.
I prefer to think that we are brother and sister of another mother and father.
There we go. I'll go along with that, my sister. Thank you. So Doug, I looked at your comments. This would have been in reference to the minutes from last month's meeting, where you gave a quick summary. It's item number 6 on the minutes. You stated, you talked about the quick summary of the use of force policy and stated that our current policy is a very traditional correctional model. And you stated there's not a lot of emphasis on soft skills or verbal skills. So to reiterate what Mary said earlier, happy to hear, as well as Jeff, I think the board, it's safe to say, speaking for our colleagues that are not on this call today, are very pleased that this approach would be taken. I think what I want to add on to is policies are good. Change is very good. It's the implementation that I'm concerned, making sure that the implementation is done and who's held accountable for those implementations. So if anybody knew really what we witnessed, the tremendous amount of cooperation from the medical side and all the things that Valerie and her team and Dr. Duchette have pulled together. That's, something we're very proud to be a part of and being linked to. I think that going forward with the correctional side has been a little more of a struggle, whether it was the leadership of the former director, or the staff. I think I'm just putting it out there now for the record that I'm very interested on the operational side. And here's why. When we talk about report writing, I have seen and noticed enough of report writing not hitting the mark, not being done in a timely manner, not being accurate. And these are wide-ranging concerns I have about report writing and how accurate and how truthful, and more so how time. So I hope that as we move forward on these new, that we're just not putting them out there for the public saying, well, we've changed the use of force and we've changed the restraint power. I'm more interested in seeing evidence that this has been done and has been done correctly and it remains consistent. So I'll air that now and still have closing comments going forward, because at the end of the day, when I was reflecting on all of the things that we've done as a board, at the end of the day, a lot of things have changed and there's been a lot of focus always at the director's position. I am focusing on some of those that received pay increases, that are supposed to be doing jobs that they got the pay increases for, but now I see they're reducing some of those job duties, which shows me there's a gap. I don't believe that we take taxpayers' money, pay exorbitant amount of overtime through favoritism, dismiss some of the very hard-working individuals in the office, that where they view maybe there's a hostile or some neglect there. Those are operational issues that we are still watching, that we're still wanting to advise, and it's Mary and I's charge, as well as everybody else on this board. We believe in transparency and accountability. Now, I'm starting to get a little disturbed of some of the other reports coming in, and at this point, I don't even know who to take the information to. I understand you're the director, and I will not disrespect your position. But as we mentioned early on in the part of this meeting, we've got investigations and requests and they're all being either controlled. They're not very timely. I'm sorry, people. We got to start picking up and holding some people accountable and demonstrating it through some very direct action, if you will. So I'll get off this soapbox. It's my fault for drinking another cup of coffee, but I wanted to get all that out while I was thinking. So Doug, I'm sorry, cut me off. Let's go forward, sir.
Okay, thank you. We are, I believe, ready to start moving towards the volunteer and employee surveys. And we were able, Wednesday, I was giving the final list of people that were listed as inactive by prior administration. It totaled 329, and when added with those to active, the combined total is 612. Many of the people and organizations listed on here do not have email addresses, but the vast majority have phone numbers. So my plan is to make it a priority to start getting the phone, using the phone numbers to reach out to, especially the inactive list, saying we have a new director, we'd like your input to see if you might be interested in coming back. So that's my goal, to get that going, if everyone's okay with that, if the board believes that's proper to do.
Doug, I wouldn't assume, based on the conversations you and I have had before, I wouldn't assume that people on the inactive list know that they're on the inactive list. Because of what has happened, because you did not have a full list, and you sent out a letter to some people saying, if you still want to be a volunteer, let us know by this date. But I know a lot of people who have been active right up until COVID, who've been teaching GED classes, and people who've been doing religious services, who never got that letter. And then we got another letter saying, thank you for letting us know you wanted to continue, because I got it because I was only put on that list when I joined the board. I never got any of the other notices before, but then they sent out a letter saying, thank you for wanting to continue. But the people who I know, and it's just off the top of my head, I know, 6 or 7 who never got that first letter and who do not know they are listed as inactive. So I applaud your willingness to spend the time and have somebody pick up the phone and call them. I would also say I will be happy to do some of that phone calling if you want me to. And I know some other volunteers. You could split up the list, and I think volunteers could reach out to volunteers and say, I'm a volunteer at the jail too. Are you still inactive? Would you like to be involved? And if so, can you give me all your contact information? I mean, I know that I can count on the fingers of this hand some people who will help you do that.
That would be fantastic. So if you don't mind, I'll reach out to you early next week.
Yeah.
I also have a draft introductory statement as part of the survey where I put in there that it is a new day. And if you had issues in the past, I'll do everything in my power to eliminate those issues. Because as you stated, and I put in the letter, we could not put a dollar amount on the services that the volunteers provide. And we have to maintain an excellent relationship.
Yeah, I think we would love a script to be able to say, a message we have to say from you. The other thing is, I just want people to know this is not fluffy stuff. This is not just AA. This is not just religious services. This is GED and parenting classes and all that stuff that actually, social services, sometimes court orders. So these are really substantive things that the jail does not have to pay for. So reach out to me next, send me the list and send me the script. And in the meantime, I'll recruit some people to make calls.
Okay, thank you very, very much.
Sure.
Absent any other comments, I'll move on. The phone contract, I believe that the RFP will be posted in December or January, and we hope to get that moving as quickly as possible. The request was to post it, has been approved. So we are on the next stage of trying to get our phone contract. And with that with the being posted, of course, we'll all be under the code of silence and can't talk anymore. I do know that there have been prior attempts, and every effort is being made to make sure that procedure is followed exactly as it has to be. We can't really afford a 5-month delay from this. We need to get this as soon as we possibly can. Okay. Any questions or comments on that?
No, I concur. Just keep up the good work, Doug. We appreciate you pushing this. We recognize how important it is, and I appreciate you coming in, giving it your attention and making sure it's still moving. So thank you for that. I have a quick question. Is there any update, Doug? I know Ray is on the phone. What's the update on the camera installation? The new cameras, what's the update on that?
Yeah, so Unique Security came in about 3 weeks ago. Unfortunately, they're one person shy because of COVID. We've been pulling cable for approximately 3 weeks throughout the jail, digging through the ceilings, all that fun stuff. We did put up, 5th floor was empty last week. So after we finished wiring, we did put up 4 cameras. It was basically a test so we could see how the housing units looked. It's a game changer. I love the view of the camera. I can see pretty much every angle.
This is Steve Capizzi. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep. Oh, okay. Sorry.
We've talked about this at a prior meeting, but as far as the locations, that could be a real safety concern for the cameras. So, I would advise that we stay away from locations and floors and how many cameras. Those kind of discussions, I don't think would be proper for our public forum for safety reasons.
All right. Sorry about that. So anyways, the work is going on. They have left town for the holiday already. That's why I'm off today, but we will get back at it November 30th. And he's bringing a bigger crew with him, and we're going to start the new intercom system as well as the cameras at the same time.
Okay. So the estimated time, that we discussed in previous meetings, is that timeline still holding, or is it possibly going to have to be extended out a little?
No, we think the project will be finished 100% by the end of February. Just remember, this includes new security electronic systems, touchscreens, cameras, intercoms as well.
Okay. All right. We appreciate that. Thank you, Ray. Thanks, Doug. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, we are under new business, and I think that was an appropriate time to bring that up, Reverend Ball. The item that I only have 2 items for new business. One is I'm very pleased to report that our coat drive was completely successful, and we received literally hundreds of coats. This was spearheaded by the Clark Fox Family Foundation, who adopted us in this project. And we're to the point where I think we already have enough coats to get through this winter without any issues. I say that except for 3X, 4X coats, we're still lacking on some of the extreme sizes, the larger size. But it amazed me that within 2 weeks of starting this, that we're already full with coats. And the final item for new business I had is that I have been monitoring the food going to the kitchen, on the floors, everything for all 3 shifts. And I can tell you that I am impressed with the quality of the food. I will start taking pictures and sending it to you, but I think that the food has really, really improved here. And the intent of Trinity, our contractor, to start providing training and a certificate program for those who are working in the kitchen, those residents who are working in the kitchen. I talked to the residents about that, and they were very excited about it. And this afternoon, I am meeting with a major employer who's interested in hiring people who are released with that certificate.
Great.
And that's all I have for new business.
Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments for the director? Mary, Jeff?
Reverend, I just noticed, I don't believe Jeff Smith still is on. I just want to note that for the remaining members.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Capizzi. Thank you. All right. Are there any visitor remarks that were submitted, Penny?
Are they on mute? You're on mute, Penny.
I'm sorry, got it. Office of Arnie C. A.C. Deinhoff, Regional and County Public Advocate. Thursday, November 19th, 2020. Reference public comments to be read at the County of St. Louis Justice Services Advisory Board meeting to be held on Friday, November 20th, 2020 at 9 a.m. Dear board members, Reverend Duval, Dr. Garza, Ms. Taylor, Professor McBride, Ms. Lee, and Mr. Smith. I am very concerned about the operations and investigations of the Justice Services Advisory Board. I am very concerned about the motives and actions of member Jeff Smith of Fenton. I am very sorry to see Reverend Phil Duval leave his position as chairman. I have concerns of Jeff D. Smith being chairman. Is Jeff Smith, as a federally convicted felon, even eligible to hold a county-appointed office? Is Jeff Smith on current probation with the Federal Office of Parole and Probation? What are Jeff Smith's motives? Is Jeff Smith making money off of the Department of Justice Services and the county? It is probably too late in this meeting, but I urge you not to cast your vote for Jeff Smith. He is evil, a close associate of County Executive Sam Page and Doug Burris. Did Jeff Smith meet Doug Burris while being incarcerated in the federal prison system? How can the department be cleaned up with this cozy relationship and continued cover-ups? What is the friendship and business relationship with Acting Director Doug W. Burris of St. Genevieve? What are the cover-ups, secrets, and holding up investigations of inmate beatings, assaults, tasings, fraud, corruption, wrongdoing, illegal activity, smuggling into the jail, drugs and narcotics, cell phones, and money? Why is Julia Chowdhury, who is on current medical leave, still communicating with lieutenants, captains, and commanders of the Department of Justice Services? Julia should have been fired a long time ago, but will now be able to retire with a lifetime pension and benefits package while she has destroyed the integrity and strength of the Department of Justice Services. Why have we, the public, been left in the dark with secrets to investigations of the county, investigations of the City of Clayton Police Department, investigations by Veracosa Group LLC, points of findings by Police Lieutenant Colonel Troy Doyle and Police Lieutenant Jack Webb? When are the jail cover-ups and wrongdoings going to come to an end? When will the jail be cleaned up? And this now exceeds the 400-word limit, so that's the end of that. And that was the only comment.
Okay. Are there any other comments?
Oh, sir, that was the only one.
I'm sorry, Penny. Did we receive any other comments?
Oh, sir.
Okay, thank you. We have no reason to entertain the consideration to go into closed session. We do not have a quorum. I think it's time for us to set the next meeting, recognizing that that fourth Friday is Christmas, so we know we will not be meeting on the fourth Friday. I'm just gonna put out there that possible meeting date of December 18th. And I'll start reaching out to the board members as soon as possible to see if December 18th could be the next board meeting. Mary, do you have any closing comments?
Well, I do want to say something that has nothing to do with the board business, but about one of our fellow members, Alex Garza, who can't be with us this morning because they changed the press conference for the pandemic task force to this morning. But
yes,
his fellow board members have been watching closely his press conferences and his interviews on CNN. And knowing Alex as we do, I just want to say in this forum that that this board has, and I'm speaking for everybody because everybody has said it, that we are really proud of him and that we are just in awe of the work that he is doing to keep us all safe. And the fact that he's not here is only because of the press conference, and we're just really proud of him and glad that he is still on this board.
Yes. Okay. I have no further comments. I want to thank everybody for attending the meeting and contributing, and look forward to meeting again. And Mr. Burris, I'll be in touch with you, sir, for some follow-up conversation. Stay safe, and everybody, see you next month. Motion to adjourn.
Second, but we can't vote, right?
Right.
I think that's right, Mary. I think you need a quorum to vote, so.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your hat, Steve. Sorry.
It's okay.
Just making sure, Steve, you were still engaged, man.
Please stay healthy, everyone, and don't see your family for Thanksgiving.
Wow. Okay. Take care.